So welcome to the podcasting seminar, Advanced Mixing Techniques. My name is Honna Veerkamp, and I'm the Creative Experience Resource Specialist at St. Louis Public Library. And Creative Experience is a digital makerspace. We have two locations at Central and Bar Libraries, and those include a small recording room where you can record your podcast. We also have computers with a lot of different audio and video editing software, as well as other resources like 3D printers and a lot of new stuff. So please check out our website, and these videos will also be available, of course, for you to look at on your own. So we're working on this is a podcasting seminar that I've been doing all fall. We are in the fourth of 5 sessions. So please check out our YouTube channel if you haven't seen the previous sessions. Today we'll be talking about advanced mixing techniques. And so last month, I went over basic editing techniques and also adding music. So if you missed that one, you'll want to check it out on our Creative Experience YouTube page. And the end of this PowerPoint presentation has resources, including links to that. If you are attending this session live, we will send you a copy of this PowerPoint so that you can click on those links and access some of the resources. It also has speaker notes that you can view. And if you are not attending it live and watching this later on YouTube and you would like to have this podcasting PowerPoint, please just email us at the address at the end of it, and we will be happy to we'll be happy to send that to you as well. So I wanted to just kind of do a quick recap, and we are going to try to move quickly today because we've got a lot to get into. Mixing is a really complicated topic that could take a long time, but basically making a podcast goes through a bunch of different steps, including the concept development, which we covered in the first session, and then the next and then recording either interviews or monologues, gathering materials that you want to put together. The next steps focus on editing, and then today we're going to be mixing. And then in the final steps involve actually putting that out on syndication, which is what we call an RSS feed, through a hosting site, and then distributing it to where people can find that and listen to that. So in the next session, our final session in December, we'll talk about some of the options for hosting and distributing. Today, we're going to be focusing on the mixing and adding effects like EQ and compression and loudness. But first of all, we need to kind of get into what some of those concepts are for audio. So equalization refers to adjusting the frequency balance of an audio signal. So when we talk about equalization, you might be most familiar with the EQ in your car, which probably has a treble and bass knob, and you can just make general adjustments to those. Maybe it has a mid-range adjustment as well. Audio software and hardware that are made specifically for EQ, there's a lot of different types of equalization, but they generally have more parameters and more fine-tuned adjustments that you can make. EQ can be used in podcasting specifically to reduce unwanted noise. So rather than boosting the bass like we might do if we're listening to music, we can use it to actually in a subtractive way. So that's what I'm going to show you is how we can use it to take out sounds that we don't want. And also when we're thinking about this, we want to keep in mind that audio signals are complex, and they include a lot of different frequencies that are mixed together. It's not just a pure tone. So that's something we have to think about when we're adjusting the different frequencies, that there's a lot of layered sounds that are going in to make up a signal. So because the EQ is affecting the loudness of certain frequency ranges, it affects the overall volume. So we're going to want to do that before we get into doing compression. So when we're thinking about compression, we have to think about dynamic range. And so dynamic range is talking about the quietest and the loudest areas in a frequency range. So if you look at this image on the screen, you can see from the waveform that there's some parts of it that are really soft and that are some parts of it that are really loud. And so thinking of different examples of dynamic range, classical music is an example of a type of audio that has a really wide and rich dynamic range. And so that's great because we can hear the crescendos, we can hear the quiet parts, and there's that great range. But if you think about trying to listen to a classical music CD while you're in your car or something, it's going to be hard to understand. A lot of times we're multitasking, people are doing the dishes, they're in their car, they're on the bus, they're listening with headphones. So that's our goal with the compression. And that's what compressors do is reduce this dynamic range in audio. So we want to also be careful not to overdo it because it can sound really unnatural. Those are a couple of concepts that we're going to be thinking about. The next thing that we want to talk about is loudness when we're talking about podcasts. And so there's a few things to understand about loudness. The first is that the way that we perceive loudness is different than the meters on our effects. I'm getting some chats that we're glitching at. Mary, are you experiencing that on your end?
I had a little bit on my end too.
Okay. How are things now?
It's okay for me right now.
It's okay for me right now. It's like every 3 minutes or so. It just comes and it's good now, but hopefully.
Okay. The connection may not be the best, but I think we'll just try to keep moving with it. Yeah, unless let me know if it's totally freezing up. We could always stop and start again or stop the recording and see if that helps. But I'll try to just keep moving on for now. Thanks for letting me know. So when I'm talking about loudness, there's a difference between the loudness meters that we'll see in Pro Tools or Audition, and which are measuring the amplitude of the sound on a scientific electronic basis. What we actually perceive with our ears is different because we are sensitive to different frequencies, particularly frequencies in the mid-range that are associated with human voice. And so there are other types of less traditional meters that are loudness meters, which actually take that into account and use algorithms to measure the perceived loudness and not just the electronic loudness of the sound. So those are kind of concepts to think about the difference between those. There are industry standards for loudness that are different for podcasts and traditional radio. So there were traditional radio loudness standards, and then they've adjusted those for podcasts. And because of the fact that podcasts are usually listened to in so many different variable environments, they tend to, the standard for that is a louder standard than for radio. And so there are some technical reasons why we want to actually mix the loudness standards to radio first and then raise it. And that has to do with not wanting to over compress it. So because we want to not have it seem too unnatural with the compression, it works better to mix it to the radio standard first and then save that file and then put it through another compressor that is a harder compressor. It's called a limiter that is for the entire overall show, and then raise that to the loudness standard for podcast. So I'm going to step you through that process for all of those things. And are you guys seeing the Pro Tools session now?
Yes.
Great. So this is, if you were in the last session, we went over the basic editing techniques, and I don't have time to review those now because we need to keep moving on. But again, I would encourage you, if you want review on that or if you missed that session, to view that on our YouTube channel. But this is the same session that we were working with if you were here for that. And so it's part of an interview that is for your library podcast. Mary and I produce a podcast for the library called Your Library Podcast. And this was from an interview that I had done for that. And I just added some music and I'm kind of remixing it. But what I want to, so we have some basic edits done, and we can see by looking in here, there's 2 tracks. There's my voice, there's Mark Pagano's voice, and I've removed the parts that were overlapping, where my voice kind of bled into his mic. I also added some music, and we did a little fade down, a very simple fade to have a bed of music, but we want to maybe adjust those, but we haven't added any effects. And so I'm going to walk you through my process for adding EQ and compression and then mixing to those loudness standards. And so I kind of go back and forth between the different plugins that I'm using because they all kind of affect each other, and particularly the compression and the loudness affect each other. So we'll go back and forth on those. And if you have that guide, it includes the basic editing from last time, and then it also has step-by-step for adding the different effects. So you can follow along with that if you want, or use it for later. The first thing I like to do is go ahead and add a master track with the loudness meter, because that's going to be, we're going to be adjusting the overall mix on that one. So I'm going to go up to track, and I'm going to go to new. And this is also, if I wanted to add other audio tracks, I could do it here, but for now we're going to do a master fader. So I'm going to change this to stereo because it's going to output to stereo. Instead of audio track, we want to go to master fader, and then we're just going to do create. It's easier for me to see where it is, so I just dragged it down there. You can see there's no sound in it right now because basically the sound from the other tracks are going to come through on it. But we want to make sure that all the outputs match. So I can see that that's correct. If not, I could click on these and change the outputs, but we just want to make sure that they match the master. And then this is where we'll put in a loudness meter. And so this will be a little bit different than, for instance, you can see if I play one of these tracks, and I want to apologize, the way that Zoom works with other applications like Pro Tools, although my levels are as high as they can be, it's going to be really quiet on your end. So if you have headphones, I would encourage you to wear them, and you're probably going to have to turn the volume up. So it may be hard to hear some of the subtleties when I'm changing these, but at least hopefully you'll hear some and see the concepts and be able to do them. But just right now, I just wanted to show you the meter. If I play this, you can see that there's a meter up here and there's meters on here. And this is what I'm talking about. Those are the decibel meters. The loudness meter that I'm going to add is a little bit different. It's the one that has that is measuring the perceptual loudness. So in the middle column of all of these tracks, we have inserts. And so I'm going to go to the master track, and I'm going to click on the first one, and I'm going to do multi-channel plugin because this is stereo. For the ones above, we'll do mono, but we'll do multi-channel here, and we're going to go down to other for this one. And we want this one called HOFA for You meter. And in the resources at the end of this PowerPoint, I've shared a couple of really great articles that go a lot more in depth of both loudness for audio in general, and then the difference between loudness for audio, for radio and podcasting. And there's a lot more in-depth information. There's also links to this plugin that you can get if you have if you have your own equipment at home. We have this installed on the Creative Experience Pro Tools computers. So this is a free plugin. So I'm just going to add that there. And the other thing about to know about Pro Tools, I mentioned this last time, but I'm using it because it is one of the software that we offer at Creative Experience. It's an industry standard, and it's the software that I've used to do the recording room demo, which is also available on our YouTube channel. And so I wanted to keep it consistent. But all of the different audio programs work in similar ways. There's different quirks that you have to learn about each of them, but a lot of these concepts will apply to any of them. So I have the default settings where I want them right now, but you will want to just make sure that the EBU mode is short term, and then the scale is LUFS 18. And this is all on the page that, that I've given you. So we're trying to get to the radio standard first, which is -24 LUFS, or loudness units. And so we're aiming for right around here up to about 23. So somewhere in here is what we're going to want. And so you'll notice that if I play any audio, it's going to come in. It's going to have them mixed together.
I'm a local musician and songwriter.
So normally I put this out of the way on another monitor, but you wouldn't see that if I did it. So I'm gonna make room for it here. So I can use either solo or mute to just isolate a track that I want to work on. So let's solo the music first. And with music, you can get away with it being a little bit louder than 23, but not a lot. And then we also actually lowered this on purpose because we want it to come lower than the music. So there's that mix too. You can see it's kind of loud at the top, but then it drops down quite a bit. So we're going to leave that alone for now. We might adjust that later compared to the voices, but for now, let's solo Mark's voice so we can see where he's coming in on there just to start with, just to get an idea.
I'm Mark
without doing anything.
Local musician and songwriter. And
so he's actually in a pretty good range without doing anything to it, but a little tiny bit on the low side. This audio was recorded in our recording room at Central, and so it's a pretty clean recording. There's not a lot that we're gonna have to clean up with it, but we're gonna make some adjustments. So the first thing that I want to do is kind of find a representative sample to work with to adjust the EQ and then the compression. And so ideally we want to have a part that has some louds and quiets so that it has a little bit of the dynamic range in it. And looking at his piece, there's not, it's pretty consistent. This is one spot, but I think it overlaps with me a little bit.
I do have my guitar. I could get it up.
So I could use that, but it has my voice in it too. So I don't like that spot quite as well. So let's see what other options we have with him talking.
That's okay.
That's also has me in there. I think that's all we have on there. So let's just find, let's see how this spot sounds.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and help.
So this has some range between these parts here. And I'm gonna just highlight it. And then if I click on the loop playback, then it'll just play that part over and over again. So it'll be good while I'm adjusting it, I can keep hearing it.
It was a really great experience.
And then I can stop and start using the space bar. It's a shortcut. So I have that set up to go. The first thing I'm going to do is the equalization. And so I'm going to do plugin and go to EQ. And we're using what's called a parametric equalizer, which are these EQ3. We want the one with the 7 band, so that gives us the most options. And so what we're seeing on here, we have these controls for a lot of different frequency range. This is all the way to the low end, below the range of human speech. This is all the way above the range of human speech. And we can use these knobs, or we can just grab and control to raise and lower certain frequency ranges and to tell it how big of a range we want. So for instance, on this high end one, right now, if I raise it, it's the high and low ends also have these two choices that you can choose between, just a mid peak frequency or what's called a shelf, where it kind of takes the end off. So let's put it on just the regular one for now. And if I raise this up, you can see that's quite a big adjustment. So if I play this and raise it, And again, I hope you can hear some of this in there.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources.
This makes a
here
huge
and
difference if
helpful
I were
people,
to raise this
and it was
way
a
up.
really great experience.
And that's way more of an adjustment that I want to make. And so we have this parameter called Q on all of these, which is the width of the range that you're adjusting. So I'm going to turn it up as high as it goes, which is 10 on this. And now it's going to give me a much narrower swath to work with. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play this again, and I'm going to raise this up, and I'm going to sweep this around, and I'm going to be listening for sounds that I don't like. And I'm raising it all the way up so that I can hear them better. And it's going to be subtle, and it might be hard to hear at home, but I'm going to be listening for things like a whistle or a static or just something that sounds like a yucky sound that we don't want in there. And then I'm going to really exaggerate it so I can find it. And then I'm going to lower it a little bit below that main line. So we're going to start this again.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
And so I'm starting to hear a little whistle right there.
Here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
And so I'm just going to go ahead and lower it just a little bit. We don't want it to be too far. And then it's pretty close to where that green one is. Let's see what we find in there. So this is the next area. And we want to just kind of keep it within its own range. I can move this one over a little bit. So let's do that again.
It was a really great experience because there's great resources here.
There's a lot of a whistle in there.
And it was a really great experience.
So I want to try to just find the place where it's worse, because you might think, why don't I just widen the Q and lower it all? But there's a lot of the voice in there that's going to get lost if I do that. So let's try that.
And it was a really great
So if I were to just make this really wide,
because there's great resources here and helpful people,
then it really just cuts out the quality of the sound.
Here.
So I want to get back to having that be a lot more fine-tuned, and I'm just going to try to find the worst spot and bring it down.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here.
So I'm hearing a lot of whistle right there.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources.
And I'm just bringing it a little bit lower than the starting point. And so it's subtle that like at that starting line, I hardly even hear that whistle, but it's there. And if I bring it down just a little bit, it just cuts that off a little bit. So I'll do that with the yellow.
And it was a really great experience.
There it is.
There's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
Do this one.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
There's a little bit right there. And we'll try this, see if we can hear anything in the very low.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience because there's great resources.
So I really don't hear much in that. So what I can do is I can put that to the other mode. It's like the shelf one. Pretty much anything below 100 hertz is not in the human range. So that's going to be like rumbles from background, from HVAC systems and stuff. So I can just take a little bit of that off.
It was a really great experience.
Safely without having to worry about it getting the voice. And since I'm not hearing anything else then that I want to notch out, I can try it that way. And so I'm going to let this run again and turn on bypass, and so we can hear how it sounds without this and have it back in.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and
that's without.
People. And it was a really great experience.
And this is with.
Because there's great resources here and helpful people. And
this one didn't need a lot of effect, and it's really subtle. So it doesn't make a huge difference, but it adds up. So we're going to leave that as it is. And then we're going to go and add a compressor. So we're going to click on the next one. And again, these have to be done in order. You want the EQ first because it affects the overall volume. And so we're going to click on the next line, do plugin. This time we're going to go to dynamics, and we're going to go to this one called BS76. Compressors are really complicated. We don't have time to get into all of the ins and outs of them today, but there are a lot of resources out there if you want to learn more about them. But basically what they're doing is that we're telling it a threshold of when a sound gets too high. When a part of a sound gets too high, we want that part of the sound to get lowered, and we're telling it how much we want it to lower as a ratio, like how much we want it to get lowered compared to the difference in the volume. And so with human voices, we want that ratio to be pretty low, or it sounds really unnatural. So the lowest here is 4. That's already set on that. So we'll leave that there. The attack and the release have to do with how fast that compressor kicks in and turns off. And so we want the release is pretty good. I like to turn this one up for voice to like 6 or 7. So we'll try that like right there. And then let's just see how it sounds without even adjusting any of these.
And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people.
So I'm going to switch now. I'm going to let that play, and I'm going to switch to the master fader. So this is where we start going back and forth to see how that's affecting the loudness on there. So,
and it was a really great experience because there's great resources.
So this is reduced it a little bit, and we want it to get it up a little bit higher.
There's great resources here and helpful people.
Unfortunately, you can't keep these open at the same time. It only lets you have one. So we're going to go back here.
Helpful people, and it was a really great experience.
And I can raise the input threshold a little bit higher. I can also raise the output. And sometimes on the guide that I've given you, it recommends looking for the meter to be around -6, and then adjusting these accordingly, adjusting the input and then adjusting the output to make up for it if you need to. But we're also doing that in tandem with looking at that loudness meter. So because this is just a decimal meter and this is a loudness meter. So I go back and forth between all those things. But let's start by just raising the input a little bit.
Because there's great resources here and helpful people.
And then let's click on this again and see how that.
Because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
And so it still needs to go up a little bit. Let's see what happens.
Helpful people. And it was a really great experience.
If we raise the output a little bit.
Resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience because there's great resources here and helpful people. And it was a really great experience and
that looks pretty good, but there's not a very wide dynamic range, but what I'm wanting to look for is that the high parts and the low parts are both around that 24 to 23, -24 to -23 range. If there's really loud points, we can also use the keyframes like we did when we adjusted the volume. We can click on there and make minute adjustments, but we're looking for something that overall sounds pretty good. So now I lost my spot. Let's try a different spot anyway.
That's okay. Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning and just see how the beginning sounds with him talking now. You want to do that anyway. You want to get kind of a representative sample, and then you want to try it out in different places.
I'm a local musician and songwriter, and
so that looks pretty good.
Doing a program in the public.
So let's try to find like a louder spot and see if that also sounds good.
Yeah. So Endangered Species Project was originally an album that
and that looks pretty good. So I'm happy with that. We're going to leave that. I'm going to do the same thing for my track, and I'm going to move more quickly on this one so that we can get it done. But we'll run through this one more time so that then we'll have all these things together. So this time I'm going to take that off of solo, and I'm going to put mine on solo. I'm just going to try that. Let's see.
Project is the Endangered.
This is good because it has some loudness right at the beginning, and then it's quiet. So let's loop this.
And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that?
And let's listen to how it is.
Project. Can you talk about your focus?
And so it's a little louder. I'm probably going to have to turn it down. I could also make adjustments on the clip. But again, I want to try to see what I can do with the compressor first. And I'm going to start with the
And this
EQ
specific
still.
project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk
So I
about
hear
your
a lot
focus on that?
of whistly stuff right in
And this
there.
specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is
Oh,
the
that's,
Endangered Species
I
Project.
hate that
Can you
sound.
talk about your focus on
Get
that?
rid of that.
And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that?
Hear that
And
right
this
in
specific
there.
project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that?
And again, I
And
don't
this
hear
specific
much
project
in
is the
that, so I'm
Endangered
going to use
Species
the
Project.
other
Can you talk
setting
about your focus
and just
on
kind
that?
of roll off the bottom
And this
a
specific
little bit.
project is the Endangered Species Project. Can
And
you
this
talk
is
about your focus on
without,
that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that?
this is with.
And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus?
Again, it's subtle, but I can hear the difference there. And we're going to work with the compressor on this one to try to even out that beginning. So we're going to go to dynamics, PF76. Once again, that's on 4. We're going to turn this up a little bit. And then we're just going to see how it does without it changing
And this
anything.
specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus
And
on
it's
that?
in a close range.
And this specific project is
It's kind of compressing that first part a little bit too much. Like I really hear a difference. So I'm going to see if I can adjust the input.
And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project.
So
Can
it
you
sounds
talk
a little-
about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that? And this
And that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna go with that. So I think that that is good with that. So let's just listen to how these things sound together. And again, we might make minor adjustments to get the line where you can make these keyframes. There's a little square that you can click on for automation levels on each track. So we can adjust those if we need to. We'll go ahead and look at them. Let's see if we like the way that the volume sounds of the music with everything. Oops, we need to take this out of solo so that we can hear everything.
Hi, I'm Mark Pagano. I'm a local musician and songwriter, and I've
So I'm gonna just lower that a tiny bit more. And I'm also gonna lower the start just a little bit. This also had the overall track lowered some. You can see that there's adjustment made on that. Let's see how that sounds. I'll pull up this meter while we're doing.
Hi, I'm Mark Pagano. I'm a local musician and songwriter, and I've been doing a program in the public schools called Music Maker for a number of years, and it's recently evolved into the Song Shaper songwriting project, and it's just about giving people the opportunity to write their own original songs and record them.
And this specific project is the Endangered Species Project. Can you talk about your focus on that?
Yeah, so
So I think that's pretty good. I mean, we put in this music just to show what it would be like to do that. That's an artistic choice of whether you would want to have music going through the whole time. Usually I don't tend to have a music bed under most of the podcasts. Sometimes I'll do that for transitions or have it under a part that I'm introducing or something to use it more as an effect to punctuate. If I were doing a more artistic collage piece, I might be more likely to have a bed running like that. But that, again, that's more of a content choice that you can think about. But I think that this is a pretty good mix like this. And for the sake of time, we're going to call it good right there. So the first thing I want to do is save this. And remember, again, this is our first save. We're going to have to do the next step to bring this up to podcast standards. So we're going to do save. And so this is only saving it as a Pro Tools session. I can only open it in Pro Tools. I wouldn't be able to listen to it on my phone or send somebody a file, anything like that, only in Pro Tools. So we have to get it mixed down to a single track that we can listen to. That's the next step. And in some audio workstations, it's called mix down, which is a little more descriptive. For some reason in Pro Tools, we call it bounce. So we're going to do that. And we want to make sure first that, I'm going to go ahead and close this. First, we want to make sure that nothing is soloed or muted unless that's what we want, because anything that is soloed or muted, that's how it will come across in the final mix too. So that's good. And then we want to use this button on the transport to return to 0 and make sure that our cursor is at the very beginning, because it's going to mix down everything to the right of the cursor. So if I started with my cursor in here, it would only get everything to the right of it. So the other option would be to just highlight everything, especially if I knew that I only wanted the first part. I could just go, say I just wanted this very beginning part. I could just highlight everything that I wanted and choose that selection instead. But I'm just going to go up here again with my cursor at the beginning to make sure it's getting everything. And then I go File, Bounce, export something different. We want bounce, File, Bounce to Disk. And then it gives up this dialog window, which when you open a Pro Tools session, there's something very similar. And so we want to check it's automatically saving a WAV file. A WAV is a higher quality file than an MP3 that's less compressed. And it's good to go ahead and do that. When we get to actually saving our final version for the podcast, we need the MP3 because that is what is uploaded for all podcasts or MP3s, because they need to be smaller to be more shareable. But for now, since we know we're going to open this in another session and change the loudness standards for podcasts, we'll go ahead and just do MP3. 44.1 kilohertz is a standard sample rate for broadcast, podcasts, any kind of music. There's a higher sample rate, 48, if you knew you were doing video, but we're not doing video right now, so 44.1 is good. 16-bit is a minimum standard. I like doing 24-bit because it gets a slightly higher quality and doesn't take up a lot more room. Offline is good to check because then it makes it go fast. Otherwise, it's in real time. And then we just want to make sure we know where this is saving to. So automatically, it's going to save into the folder that you've created, and it will create a new folder called bounced files. And so that's good. I have this on my desktop right now. And incidentally, the workflow for Pro Tools in particular, it recommends that if you have a flash drive or a hard drive that you're working from, for instance, if you're at Creative Experience and bring your own storage device, it recommends that you drag the whole file onto the desktop and then save it there and then work from the desktop rather than from a storage device, because it uses a lot of processing power and sometimes things get messed up when it's working off of a storage device. And then you drag the whole finished thing back to your storage device at the end. So I have this on my desktop and that's where I want it to save. I want it to save in that folder. So I'm just going to say bounce, and it's creating this new file. And so now I'm going to create a new session in that same folder. And this is where I'm going to raise it to the podcast standards. So I'm going to do File, and I'm going to do Create New. And then right now I have this, I'm going to make sure that it's going in the same place. So incidentally, this is a folder from the session we are working with and it automatically creates all these inside folders. And whenever you're moving it around, you want to make sure that you're moving that cover folder that has everything in it, because you don't want to miss any of these. You can't just take the Pro Tools session without any of these, because it's just a map that's referencing those things. And so when we created that bounced files, that's where it ended up before. So this is good. I like to actually create this new session within the other session folder, so it's right there together. So I'm going to say open and keep that there. I just had this untitled. I didn't have a title for it before, but ideally this would be your podcast title. And for this new Pro Tools session within it, I'm going to add -18 to remind myself that this session is where the one that's been raised to -18 is located, so that I can find it easily. So I'm going to say, okay, create. It's asking me if I want to save changes to this. Sure, we'll save it, even though we already did. And this is the new session we created. So now I'm going to import that bounced file that we just made. So I'm going to go up to File, and then Import Audio. And I'm going to navigate back. It's actually already there. So it's navigating to that file. If it ended up just in the desktop, then we would see this. We navigate to the bounced file, and then this one that we did. When you're importing a file, you either can add it, or depending if it's a different file type, like if it were an MP3 or something, you might have to convert it. But this is the same type of file we've been working with, the WAV. So we'll just say add, and then we'll say done. And it's asking us if we want it on a new track. We say yes, so that's good. Okay. And so this is our mixdown file that we made last time. And if I play this.
Hi, I'm Mark Pagano. I'm a local musician.
This is all three of those tracks mixed down together into one. So now we have it imported in here. And so now what we need to do is take this and add a limiter, which is like a type of compressor that is more powerful and also less subtle. That's why we want to wait until we already have a mix and then raise the whole thing, rather than trying to do this at the same time. So we are going to use that to change the output level from the -24 LUFS or loudness units to the -18, which is the standard for podcasting. So I'm going to just click this to highlight. And in this case, you could add you could do this as an insert, the other option. And since I only have one whole file to process, I'm going to do it as an audio suite. If it's clicked, you can go up and find your effects here. The reason why, when you do it this way, you have to process it, and then it's the effect is kind of baked in. You can't really change it. You can't take it off or anything. So I don't like to do that when I'm doing my first mixes, but for something like this, when I'm only affecting the entire show and I know what I want the setting to be, it's okay to do that. So I'm going to go up to Audio Suite. We're going to Dynamics again. And this time we're going to use one this is one that comes with Pro Tools called Maxim. And if you were using a different audio workstation, those articles that I'm sharing in the resources have step-by-step process for how to do this in each different audio workstation that you might be using. So we just want to use this to make it reduce the whole overall levels down to, to raise it, I'm sorry, it's negative numbers, so it's a little confusing, but to raise it to -16 loudness units. So we're going to go on the threshold, and we're going to do 8, because that's the difference between -24 and -16. Try to get it right at 8. And then the ceiling, we're going to set this at -2. -0 is right around where we're going to get distortion. And so we want to just lower it a little bit more of how the highest sounds, the loudest sounds can go, just so that we have a little bit more wiggle room there. And then here we do render, and this is what I'm saying, it actually has to process it, so you can't undo it. But now we can just listen and make sure that it sounds good.
Hi, I'm Mark Pagano. I'm a local musician.
So you're probably not going to hear a lot of difference in the way that it sounds, except that it sounds a little bit louder. And so that's good. And now we're going to do file, save, just to save this whole thing. And then we have to bounce it again to get it out of here. Even though it's one single track, we still have to bounce it again so that it retains the effect and everything. So we can either highlight it or put the cursor at the beginning like we did last time. And then we go to file, bounce to disk. And then we get this. This time we want to make sure that we are using the add MP3 option, because this is the final version that is going to be our final saved podcast that we're going to upload. And for that reason, we also want to take -18 out of the title and have this be the name of the podcast. So whatever the name of the podcast is that you want to see in on one of the podcast platforms, that's what we put here. And it's going to be going into the bounced folder of that -18 one that I created. So I'll know where to find it and I'll know how to distinguish it. But that way, the file that I name it is the final file for my podcast. And you can always change it later, but it's just a good idea to do it that way. And then when we do bounce, we get this next window since we have an MP3. And this is where we add metadata. And this is also important for a podcast, because when we create a syndication feed, which we'll talk more about next time, this is the kind of stuff that will show up when someone looks at a podcasting distributor site. You need to know what the title is, what the artist is. So you would put those kind of things. For a podcast, you typically don't want track. Pro Tools, for some reason, doesn't have podcast as a genre. I think there is other on here that you could choose, or just leave it unknown. If there's anything else you wanted to add in here, you can, but you just say, okay, and then it's bouncing. And so then this is our final mixed down version. So I just wanted to show where these folders end up. So if I'm on the desktop, and then here's the original session that I created, and then this is the new session that I created inside of it. And then it has its own bounced files, and these are the final versions that we have in here. And so this is the one, the MP3 version is the one that I would actually upload for my podcast. If I were going to take this and put it on my drive to make sure I had everything, I would want to make sure I get the very outer cover that has everything inside of it. And then if I was going to upload it to Google Drive or something like that for sharing, there's just one additional step that I would compress it. So I would zip the file. So you just right click and on a Mac, I do compress. On a PC, it would say send to compressed disk, and then it creates a zipped folder of this entire thing. It takes a minute to do that. And then if I were going to put it onto the cloud, some kind of cloud storage, I would upload that zip file, just because when you're uploading big files like this with folders within folders, even if you're in Google Drive and it says upload a folder, things get messy and things get corrupted. And so it's just always better to upload the zipped folder. And then when I came back to use it, I would double click to open it, and then just find that and drag it outside of the file to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my PowerPoint.
I do have a question about
Sure.
something that you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
You created an MP3 version of your podcast.
Yes.
And saying that you upload the whole Pro Tools folder to these other platforms rather than just the MP3?
Thank you for asking about that. To clarify, that's not for the podcast. So just for podcasting, for when you're putting it on your hosting site and what goes out to distribution, that would be just the MP3 file. I'm talking about saving your work and file management so you can find things later. And I'm talking about, for instance, if you weren't working on your personal computer, if you were working at Creative Experience or someplace where you needed to save your work either onto your own flash drive or hard drive or into your own personal Google Drive, this is how you would do it. And so because the Pro Tools workflow recommends that you work on the desktop because you have more processing power than when you're working directly from some kind of drive. And then I just mentioned Google Drive and stuff like that because some people prefer to save their work to an online storage platform so you don't have to carry around a flash drive or a hard drive. And that's totally fine. It's just that if you're doing that, I would recommend compressing it so that the files don't get corrupted. But you're absolutely right. When you go to upload your podcast, your final podcast to the podcasting platform, you're only going to want to be uploading the MP3 at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And I have one other, I think it's a quick question too.
We're ready for questions.
Is there a reason that you created an MP3 rather than a WAV file?
Yes, MP3s are required for podcasts because WAVs take up too much room. And so the hosting sites don't allow you to upload a WAV file.
Okay, thank
All
you.
All podcasts are MP3.
Thank you.
I'm happy to stay for more questions. We're right about at time. So I do want to just show you these resources that we have here. Again, we'll send this out, or you can email us and ask if you would like this file. But we have the link to our creative experience page, the link to our library podcast page, and then our YouTube channel where you can find all of these previous sessions, as well as a virtual recording room orientation that I produced. And then these are the two articles that I really recommend that do a great job of talking about loudness and also have the free plugins. And then finally, we are today on November 18th, the fourth of 5 sessions. Next month, we'll be doing hosting, distribution, and promotion. So please check the Creative Experience webpage to sign up for that. Also, you can contact us at cxp@slpl.org and check out the previous videos on our YouTube channel, and this one will be up as well soon. So thank you for coming today. We're going to go ahead and stop recording, and then I'll be available for questions. So thanks for joining me today.